President Trump and Vice President Mike Pence on Thursday at Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster, NJ Al Drago for The New York Times, Washington. Sometimes, 140 characters just aren't enough. 7 days into a 17-day working vacation in Bedminster, NJ, President Trump unburdened himself during two lengthy, impromptu news conferences on Thursday, eagerly ping-ponging through the litany of domestic and foreign policy issues that have consumed his administration for weeks. Ignoring his press secretary, who was holding a "one more question" sign in the back of the room, Mr. Trump doubled down on his threats to North Korea, shrugged off Russia's ejections of hundreds of American embassy staff, defended his abrupt decision on transgender troops, and claimed he had never considered firing the special counsel, directly contradicting his own private statements to aides and friends. In sometimes rambling answers filled with words like fantastic and great and biggest and finest, the president bragged about everything from the state of the economy, the size of his nuclear arsenal, the breadth of his achievements, and the increase in security at the border with Mexico. He called Lt. Gen. H.R. McMaster, his national security advisor, my friend and a very talented man. Mr. McMaster was sitting to Mr. Trump's right. But the president did not foreclose the idea that Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky and the majority leader, should step aside if Republicans fail to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Altogether, the president dabbled in more than a dozen topics for reporters gathered at his golf club, each one generating newspaper headlines and chyrons on television. Just like his tweets by B. McConnell after days of venting, on Twitter and in private, over the Senate's failure to pass a healthcare repeal bill before the August recess, Mr. Trump was asked if Mr. McConnell should consider stepping down. "I'll tell you what," Mr. Trump began, "if he doesn't get repeal and replace done, and if he doesn't get taxes done, meaning cuts and reform, and if he doesn't get a very easy one to get done, infrastructure, if he doesn't get them done, then you can ask me that question." Asked if that answer amounted to a yes or a no, Mr. Trump replied, "You can ask me the question. That means ask me that question. Let's hope he gets it done." The comments were a remarkable acceleration of tensions between a president aggrieved at his lack of significant legislative accomplishments to date, and the lawmaker tasked with shepherding his agenda through a Republican-held Congress. They also signaled a conspicuous desire from Mr. Trump, who often campaigned as a renegade outsider with few meaningful allegiances to either party, to again position himself as a crusader against Washington gridlock, even though he and his allies are now at the controls, grinding the gears. The laconic Senate leader has strained all year to wrangle his narrow majority. Mr. McConnell has gotten little help from an often disengaged and policy-averse president whose habit of setting arbitrary and often shifting deadlines has frustrated senators for months. Mr. McConnell's team showed little appetite for a protracted feud. Antonia Ferrier, Mr. McConnell's spokeswoman, issued a subdued comment in response about the path forward to repeal and replace the healthcare law and added, "But if he has any new statements today, he'll be sure to send them along." Matt Flegenheimer Edmore. Thanks for that, Putin. President Vladimir V Putin of Russia this month. Alexei Nikolsky Sputnik asked about Russia's decision to force the United States Embassy in Moscow to slash its personnel by 755 people. Mr. Trump might have echoed the bipartisan outrage of other American leaders. Instead, the president praised President Vladimir V Putin of Russia, expressing gratitude to a top adversary for effectively downsizing the American embassy, saving United States taxpayers the cost of salaries. "I want to thank him, because we're trying to cut down on payroll, and as far as I'm concerned, I'm very thankful that he let go of a large number of people, because now we have a smaller payroll," Mr. Trump said. His comment was in keeping with his practice of not criticizing Mr. Putin, no matter how tense relations between Washington and Moscow have grown. 2 weeks ago, Mr. Putin seized 2 American diplomatic properties and ordered the American diplomatic staff cut by more than half, retaliating for sanctions imposed by Congress to punish Russia's meddling in last year's presidential election in the United States. There's no real reason for them to go back. So I greatly appreciate the fact that we've been able to cut our payroll of the United States. We'll save a lot of money, Mr. Trump said. Peter Baker Edmore, Fire Mueller who? Me Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel investigating Russian meddling in the election, in June. Doug Mills to New York Times asked whether he had considered firing Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel investigating the Russian election meddling. Mr. Trump said that he had not. "I haven't given it any thought. Well, I've been reading about it from you people. You say, oh, I'm going to dismiss him. No, I'm not dismissing anybody. I mean, I want them to get on with the task, but the statement stood in contrast to what Mr. Trump has privately told people close to him in recent months. The president has discussed both the possibility of firing Mr. Mueller and his concerns that the investigation will undermine his presidency. In June, one of Mr. Trump's longtime friends, Christopher Ruddy, said in a television interview that Mr. Trump was considering firing Mr. Mueller. Mr. Trump also characterized as tepid his relationship with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. It's fine, and shared his reaction to reports that Mr. Mueller's investigators searched the home of his former campaign chairman, Paul J. Manafort. I thought it was pretty tough stuff to wake him up. Perhaps his family was there. Meanwhile, Mr. Manafort, who had been represented by Reginald J. Brown of the law firm WilmerHale, announced that he was switching lawyers. As of today, WilmerHale no longer represents Mr. Manafort, a spokesman for Mr. Manafort said. Mr. Trump said he had not spoken to Mr. Manafort for a long time, but I've always found Paul Manafort to be a very decent man. He's like a lot of other people, probably makes consultant fees from all over the place. Who knows? I don't know. The Justice Department's investigation into possible links between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia's election interference has engulfed the White House in political and legal scrutiny. Last month, Mr. Trump described Mr. Sessions as beleaguered and said that he would not have made him Attorney General if he knew he was going to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. It is what it is, Mr. Trump said on Thursday of his relationship with Mr. Sessions. It's fine. Michael Schmidt-Tredmore, a great favor to transgender troops. Demonstrators in July in New York after Mr. Trump banned transgender people from serving in the military. Carlo Allegri. Reuters. 2 weeks after declaring on Twitter that transgender people would be banned from serving in the military, Mr. Trump said that he is doing the United States military a great favor. The Pentagon has made no move to expel personnel since the commander-in-chief first announced the ban. And the White House has yet to make public any formal guidance on how the Defense Department is supposed to turn Mr. Trump's tweets into policy. But Mr. Trump said that it's been a very confusing issue for the military, and I think him doing the military a great favor. He declared that he has great respect for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people and denied that his ban amounted to a betrayal after pledging to protect them during last year's presidential campaign. I've had great support from that community, Mr. Trump said. I got a lot of votes. He said that the military is working on it now, adding, I think him doing a lot of people a favor by coming out and just saying it. Defense officials said they were taken by surprise by Mr. Trump's announcement on July 26. One administration official said the White House is considering urging transgender service members to retire early. But a defense official, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said on Thursday that doing so might be difficult to defend in court. Helen Cooper Edmore, page 2. Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel investigating Russian meddling in the election. In June. Doug Milston, New York Times, Washington. President Trump said on Thursday that he had not considered firing Robert S. Mueller III, the special counsel investigating Russian meddling in the election, contradicting private statements the president has made to his aides and friends about his desire to dismiss Mr. Mueller. Mr. Trump spoke about the special counsel in a wide-ranging briefing with reporters at his golf club in Bedminster, NJ, where he also characterized as tepid his relationship with Attorney General Jeff Sessions. It's fine, and shared his reaction to reports that Mr. Mueller's investigators searched the home of his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. I thought it was pretty tough stuff to wake him up. Perhaps his family was there. The Justice Department investigation into possible links between Mr. Trump's associates and Russia's election interference has engulfed the White House in political and legal scrutiny. The revelation that Mr. Trump asked the FBI Director, James B. Comey, to end the inquiry into his first national security advisor, Michael T. Flynn, prompted the appointment of Mr. Mueller as a special counsel in May. And the president's public scoldings of Mr. Sessions in recent weeks have prompted speculation that he is seeking a path to end the investigation. Asked about the possibility of firing Mr. Mueller, the president said on Thursday, I haven't given it any thought. Well, I've been reading about it from you people. You say, oh, I'm going to dismiss him. No, I'm not dismissing anybody. I mean, I want them to get on with the task. Mr. Trump added, we're working with him. We have a situation that's very unusual. There was no collusion between us and Russia. In fact, the opposite. Russia spent a lot of money on fighting me during the campaign. But the statement stood in contrast to what Mr. Trump has privately told people close to him in recent months. The president has discussed both the possibility of firing Mr. Mueller and his concerns that the investigation will undermine his presidency. In June, one of Mr. Trump's longtime friends, Christopher Ruddy, said in a television interview that Mr. Trump was considering firing Mr. Mueller. In response to reports about the search of Mr. Manafort's home, Mr. Trump said he thought it was a very, very strong signal, or whatever, by prosecutors, adding that he was surprised they took such a step because it is something they very seldom do. Obtaining and executing a search warrant is considered an aggressive step for authorities, who are required to demonstrate they have probable cause to believe they will find evidence of a crime. Experts said Mr. Mueller might be pressuring Mr. Manafort into cooperating with the inquiry. Investigators sought tax documents and foreign banking records from Mr. Manafort, who is under investigation for his business dealings, his attendance at meeting between campaign officials and Russians, and whether his work for the Ukrainian government violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Mr. Trump said he had not spoken to Mr. Manafort for a long time, but that he has always found Paul Manafort to be a very decent man. He's like a lot of other people, Mr. Trump said. Probably makes consultant fees from all over the place, who knows, I don't know, but I thought it was pretty tough stuff to wake him up, perhaps his family was there. I think that's pretty tough stuff. Mr. Manafort, whose lawyer had been Reginald J. Brown of the law firm Wilmer Harley, announced on Thursday that he was rehiring the Miller Chevalier law firm, a spokesman for Mr. Manafort said in a statement. As for the president's relationship with Mr. Sessions, whom he described last month as beleaguered, Mr. Trump was brief. It is what it is, he said. It's fine. Correction: August 10, 2017. An earlier version of this article misstated the first name of the Attorney General. He is Jefferson, or Jeff, not Jeffrey. A version of this article appears in print on August 11, 2017, on page A12 of the New York edition with the headline "Trump denies weighing whether to fire Mueller."